and wherever you're joining us for today's online event, Digital Supply Chain Twins. My name is Nicole Bamford, and I'm the moderator for today's session. On behalf of the Industrial Transformation Network team, we thank you for joining us today. This session, how Ford, Georgia-Pacific, and Lockheed Martin are using digital twins to build supply chain resilience, will be presented by Vijay Kemparaj, Digital Twin Lead at Ford, Jan Denijs, LM Fellow, Enterprise Digital Production at Lockheed Martin, Ron Norris, Director of Operations Innovation at Georgia-Pacific, and their discussion will be led by Shannon Catcher, Vice President Digital Innovation from GTI Energy. Their discussion promised to be well worth the listen. Before we get started, here are some quick administrative points. During the webinar, if you have questions for our presenters, please submit them in the Q&A box on your screen, and these will be answered during the question portion of the webinar. Likewise, for any technical issues, please write them into the Q&A section and we'll get to them right away. You'll notice the widgets on your screen can be resized and dragged around for your viewing preferences. So make sure you're sitting comfortably, and I'll now hand it over to Shannon so we can begin.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for that introduction. It's my pleasure to be here today with this amazing panel. I'm looking forward to the discussion that we're about to have. Supply chains are, I don't even have to say it, increasingly more critical for not only every industry, but also keeping more record in a digital fashion of what's going on, where things are, how to help our suppliers, how to help our customers from start to finish. There's greater requirements on traceability and otherwise. So I don't need to say it, but supply chains are super critical to keep our economies and our people going. And I'm really excited today to talk to this panel. What I'll ask first is that they each introduce themselves and maybe introduce a little bit about how their organizations are using digital twin supply in their supply chains. So maybe I can start with Vijay and then go to Jan and Ron after that. Vijay, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Sinan. From a Ford perspective, we are using the digital twin for creating the supply chain logistics. So this we are doing in two terms, trying to list out the capabilities that are required into the technology way. And once the technologies are identified, in a nutshell, how we are trying to simplify the digital twin, what we are trying to achieve in the logistic ways. It's providing the right material at a right quantity in a right container to the right location and right time, and doing this consistently every time without having any kind of glitches in the overall flow. So that'll be what we are trying to achieve is so at any point in time in the end-to-end process flow, not compromising anything in terms of the quality or downtime or in terms of the customer satisfaction. So providing the high shareholder value.
Excellent, thanks. Jan, over to you.
Yes, so good morning or afternoon, wherever everybody is. My name is Jan Denijs. I'm an LM Fellow for Enterprise Digital Production at Lockheed Martin. Coming to you from a hotel room in Orlando, Florida. I'm actually on the road. I'm not at my home base. So supply chain. Supply chain is incredibly important to us. If you take many of our products, you'll find that more than 90% of the parts that make up our products are actually coming from the supply chain. And it used to be that the supply chain was being asked to ship a part in, and then when this part was received, we would pay for that part, and basically then it went to manufacturing, my world, production world, and we would use that part, and we would then test the part and test the assembly. If the assembly met the requirements of our customer, it would move on. That whole paradigm is changing. We want from our supply chain, we want data. We want to know how that part was made, how that part was actually tested, all these types of data artifacts now are going to become deliverables from my supply chain. That is a whole new paradigm. Supply chain is just not used to that. And how to deal with that, that is fundamentally my responsibility. I'm working on strategies on making sure that we will get consistent data artifacts from the supply chain that we can actually use in our use cases on top of that data. KPIs, looking at whether supply chain can actually do the parts, capability, capacity, simulations, these types of things we want to do at the corporate level, and we would like to use the data from our vendors for that. So that's my role in the whole supply chain digitization project.
Thanks, Jan. Over to you, Ron.
All right. Thanks, Shannon. I'm Ron Norris. I'm with Georgia Pacific. We're based in Atlanta. We have 150 manufacturing sites across mostly the U.S., but some in Canada, some in Mexico. We are in a couple of key industries. We are in pulp and paper. We make a whole lot of the paper towel and toilet paper and tissue that is sold across the country. So it's not our fault that COVID happened and you didn't have toilet paper. We had it. We just couldn't get it to you. We're also in building products and packaging. And so, with 150 manufacturing facilities, the supply chain is long and tedious, and it's varied because of the different different products that we do make. I think that, Shannon, that was a good question, because if you think about what drove us to become more automated in a way that it's from a machine standpoint, is that data is going to exponentially explode. It's already exploded on us. When you look at all the data that is coming in, it's incredible. And quite honestly, we can't keep up with it. And so we said, we have got to find a capability that can help us sort through all this data. What does it mean? And then don't just give us a dashboard, because I don't know if everyone else on the call is like this, but a lot of times when you see a dashboard, it's got a lot of different things on it, and you go, well, what am I supposed to do with all of this? You have to then go hire analysts to look at the thing and sit next to you and tell you, oh, okay, well, if this is there, then we have to do something else over here. And so with the digital twins, which in our case are AI powered, we've programmed into it knowledge given by the subject matter experts within the different domains. And so when the twin gives us a response, it's not just a bunch of things on a dashboard. It gives us recommendations. It's like, here's the problem. Here's a couple of recommendations on how to solve the problem. And so we are a little bit different use case. I know that Ford's got their own different use case, and Jan's got his different use cases. And I think that's one thing, Shannon, that we could all agree on, is that there's a lot of difference on what you call a digital twin across everybody, not only just on this call, but probably everybody in the audience.
I completely agree. I think if you asked everyone on this call and in the audience to give their definition of digital twin, we'd probably come up with a slightly different answer from everyone. So that completely resonates. And I think, your point about all the data and all the information that's out there, and making it actionable is a really important point. Go ahead.
How do you create value? It's the whole point. How do you create value out of that data as it continuously increases on you? Because if you don't create value with it, then it's useless. And you just don't even need to have it. And if you don't use it, your competitors will start using it, and then you're going to fall behind.
Absolutely. And I think also around your point about incorporating the subject matter expertise within the digital information is actually super critical, where my experience is mostly in the energy industry. So my experience with digital twins, and especially as they relate to supply chains, is mostly with infrastructure that supports our energy systems. And so, Jan, this also resonates, some of the things that you said also resonated with me, where we need information on integrity and be able to prove the testing properties along the way. But all this data needs to be able to come to a point and make sense somewhere. And with that, it kind of leads into the next question that I have for each of you, which is, because of all these different definitions of digital twin and how these twins apply to the supply chain, there's kind of different levels of maturity embedded within implementing digital twins. And each of you said a little bit about what your use cases are and how you're applying them. Maybe it would add a little bit more context to explain where you feel your organization is in terms of maturity level, how far you've come and maybe how far you have to go. And I know that's a little bit of a subjective question because, the more you know, the more you learn, the less you know. Especially the more you implement, the more you realize, you need the additional analyst or additional cloud environments or tools or whatever it may be. So for this, maybe we can kind of go in reverse order, start with you, Ron, Jan, and then BJ. I'd love to hear from all of you where you think you're at with maturity level.
So Shannon, we started in on what we originally were calling digital transformation in 2015. We called it digital transformation for about a year, and then we just figured out, okay, well, that's just completely wrong because it's not just digital transformation. We're transforming everything. Because when you transform one thing, it affects the other thing downstream of it. And so you have to go fix that and transform that. And so we just started calling it transformation. But one of the things that we saw was that at that time, we had about 45% of our workforce that was going to be 65 years of age or older in 2023. And so that's pretty scary. You can't replace somebody that has been with you for 25 or 30 years with someone that just comes out of school. Nothing against the person that just comes out of school, but there's a lot of knowledge that's just walking out the door. And so we thought, okay, first of all, we've got to find a way to capture this knowledge before it gets out the door. And then we have to find a way to help these the new workforce that's coming in to share this knowledge. And so that was one of the things that got us started. And we actually kind of picked Shannon, one of the things that I would like to say also is that I think a lot of times people come to these types of events or look online at these types of events and they hear what we have to say and they want to come away with, what do I do next? How do I get started, right? And so that's kind of what this question is about. We picked a problem that we had, and we said, all right, if we can go fix this problem with this new AI that we're creating, which not only has data correlation, which is like traditional AI, but it does utilize knowledge. It utilizes knowledge that we feed to it by college courseware from books it can read. It can look at white papers from your favorite consultant, and it takes transcriptions of interviews from our subject matter experts. And so it learns the domain that it's in from the people that actually do that work every day. And that was instrumental in us getting to a point to where with the twin that the thing can actually give us a recommendation because it understands the problem, because it understands the domain that it's working in. For instance, does it work in order management? That was our first thing that we tackled. So we said, hey, this actually worked, and the results were incredible. And so we said, you know what we need to do is build this thing modularly so we can go teach it other things. And so it's one of those things that you just discover. And that's one of the things that I'll say and then pass it to Jan, is that what did we learn? What we learned is that what we knew was not enough. And so we learned to not let what we know get in the way of what we were about to learn. Hopefully that makes sense, right? Don't let what you know get in the way of what you're about to learn, because it's a completely different thing. And start out small, find something that you can deal with, and then you'll start expanding on it. Jan?
Yes. Yeah, our journey, of course, is somewhat similar. We, as a corporation, also decided that we needed to change, and we also called it digital transformation. We have actually a new name every year. This year is One LMX. We are going through all these names, but fundamentally, it's a realization that we, as a corporation, need to shed our siloed structures and come together as one, and really start to look at the whole corporation as a single entity, so that we're much more integrated and that we can actually execute more use cases across the enterprise. But maturity is, in my opinion, a really interesting and double-edged sword. And that's by purely empirical, we found that out. When we started our digital journey, if you will, pretty quickly we were focused on dashboards, right? They're easy to make. Very, very quickly you can show something, and so we did. And then everybody was basically shrugging, like, so what? What we learned. This is information that the supervisors should have at their fingertips. The supervisors, they should be basically, you are nothing but tabulating supervisor data. So why are we doing this? Why are we spending money on this? What we need, and then our VPs went off to some resort, of course, where they heard about AI and blah blah blah, and they came back and they said, we need to have this self-regulating, automatically, doing whatever it is thing. And they basically went to the other side of the maturity spectrum. They said, our vision is that we will eventually have this. I remember one of the VPs coming back saying, like, look, what I need is, I want to step up in my Tesla in the morning, and what I want to do is I want to ask my Tesla, what are the top 5 manufacturing issues that I have in all of my plants across the corporation? And if you really start to cut that down into small pieces, you basically need to have insights in virtually everything you're doing, from your supply chain to your manufacturing to your everything needs to basically roll up. And of course, then we start to pursue some of those, and then we start to find out that if you can't do the basic dashboards, you can also not really do these really advanced use cases. So if you don't focus on getting the lower, like what you're saying, I think that's what you probably mean. Start small. So you do need to be really good at creating dashboards. Your people need to be able to configure these, understand what the data is behind it, learn from it, before you can go to the next step, which may be a scheduling use case that you build on top of that, which then goes into maybe a prescriptive type supply chain use case that you build, eventually leading up to these really massive AI-driven use cases at the very top. So what we found is if we pursue those massive use cases at the top, which are very valuable, I get that. People want to pursue those. What you may get is somebody may actually come up with a demo, MVP as we currently call it. They do an MVP, they make a beautiful video, they knock your socks off, and that was it. It's unusable after that. It doesn't scale. It doesn't. You get this snowflake, and that you give the guy a bonus because it looks so great, but then you try to do it somewhere else and it just completely fails. So that's now leading us go back. We are actually already a step beyond that. We're now going back to the basics. We need to understand what the data is, data architecture, data standardization, standard data models. On top of that, you build, your relatively simple dashboards, diagnostics. And then you start into the predictive type use cases, prescriptive, and eventually you hope to get these really solid use cases that can have some form of autonomy in them, and that is of course where the value is. But our VPs want to jump to autonomy. That's their knee-jerk reaction. We want autonomy, and we've tried it, and it's been difficult. We have beautiful examples of it. I mean, I can show you videos that are absolutely mind-boggling. but it only works for one specific tool stack with one specific product, with one specific set of suppliers. It doesn't get any further than that. The moment I add a supplier, the whole thing falls like a house of cards, and we can't do anything with it. So we call it right now. I start to call it, and I got flacked for that, but I still call it fragile AI. It is AI that works with one set of tools and use cases, but it falls apart when you make even the slightest changes. So we're in the world of where we have great examples in AI, but they're very fragile. They're easy to make fall apart, and so you need to really go back to the basics: data architecture, understanding what the data does for you, little use cases, and start small and start building experience on top of that.
Really
DJ?
Great tips. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, DJ.
Yep. Thank you. So my take is at least a couple of years when we started, so the digital twin term was like it encompasses everything. But now over the period of time when we matured, so we kind of understand, so the digital twin is not one term that can encompass all the enterprise level. So that is getting divided into multiple levels of digital twin, like logistic digital twin and manufacturing digital twin. And then the design digital twin, like that multiple disciplines are coming together and trying to create that enterprise level digital twin. So on that note, altogether where it is driving is that it is kind of moving towards kind of a complete digital transformation kind of an initiative to realize the bigger digital twin objective. So in that regard, inside Ford, since it's been a very legacy company, it's from industrialization age, and now we are coming into the digital native and digital age. We have a lot of heritages, a lot of legacies associated to it, which means in the logistics and supply chain, there are plenty of IT systems are involved, and the data are sitting in multiple silos so many days. And when any people, the core groups, when they wanted to take any decisions on their day-to-day activities, it's very difficult for them to find the right data. It's like providing the right data to the right people at the right time. So the data itself is not available, so they need to go hunt for the data. It's more than 30-40% of the time they are just spending on the data or recreating the data that someone has created, or finding the right version of the data. These kinds of because of these kinds of the things, the data are sitting in the silos, and the different systems are not talking to each other. So there are a lot of transformation activities that are going on, one from the ERP side and the PLM side and the CRM side. A lot of legacy systems are moving away and coming into one end-to-end IT systems which will talk to each other, so that all the live data will be available. So even sometimes if I need to understand how many suppliers have delivered on time and how many are in backlog and what parts are not supplied yet, and if I don't get the right data, then the decision that I'm going to take based on that data will be very difficult. So to do that analytics, we are trying to not only bringing the digital thread kind of a thing to interconnect everything. At the same time, we are trying to consolidate all the data in one place in an organized way. And once the data is organized, we are trying to expose that data to any business partners, whoever wants to consume it, to create their own ML system or AI system. So in here, the catch is, so far in the over of years, that what we learned is, so the business team and the IT or the technology team cannot work separately. So they have to come hand in hand, work together. And sometimes because of the digital twin, there are a lot of new digital applications needs are rising, right from the collections of the data or processing the data, or even after processing, notifying the data to the suppliers. So there are a lot of small digital microservices are required to reach the digital twin objective. So we are democratizing some of these areas rather than having it in one centralized area, so that that centralized team always will go get the points from the pain points from the business team and do it. There are a lot of democratization is happening in terms of consuming the data, in terms of developing the applications, or in terms of automating the process. We are exposing or enabling the business team with the right set of tools, so that they can create their own set of digital applications. So that will improve the efficiency and avoid the structural cost. So on the maturity perspective, so still it's evolving, and we are at a very, I would say, 30-40% we are in that stage. It will take a long time for us to reach all these benefits. So that's what, it's not like always the long digital transformation. So wherever it is possible, like a quick wins kind of a thing, if in 1 year, if we are able to get the payback. So we are trying to attack those things also, and giving the control back to the business team through the democratization. That's how we are evolving.
Excellent. I think you all brought up some really important issues, and I think embedded within there, I heard challenges with scalability. I heard, kind of crawl, walk, run type of a process. And I would say, Jan, you described the descriptive, predictive, prescriptive, curve, which I think is sort of an exponential curve. It's a lot easier to start having the data to describe your system, and then, a bit heavier of a lift to start prescribing, suggested responses, and then to get to the really prescriptive stuff. I mean, that's a huge, exponential lift compared to the previous steps. So, and BJ, I think you really drive us into the next question. And by the way, everyone, please enter your questions. Even if we don't have time to get to them, we will try to circle back with you after the session, but please don't hesitate to enter them in. Vijay, you mentioned democratizing data and having maybe more transparency across silos. I think that there's also, you mentioned suppliers as well. I think there's external entities that we're trying to collect and share data with and from. So, maybe we can go to you, Jan, and talk about how you've incorporated, suppliers or external, maybe I'll just say general external entities into this digital application of understanding your supply chain.
Always the problem of coming off mute. Sorry about that. Yes, the supply chain. I think what is I think I already hinted at that. Fundamentally, what is changing? Digital transformation. There were a lot of people that were thinking that the only thing that they needed to change was the IT department, right? It is digital transformation is at core a changing culture. The culture needs to change, and one of the culture changes that I think is going to be really, really, really difficult to change is that to have the supply chain getting used to not just supply me with something out of aluminum or something out of steel, but also follow it up with a bunch of data artifacts that describe that thing that you just sent me. Okay, fundamentally, that is where I see the problems. Today that thing is a PDF or a text file or an Excel spreadsheet or even a sticky pad that they stick on something, and that is totally useless to me. That is totally useless to my customer. What we want to do is we want to take that information that you have, and we want to use that so that we can develop use cases for our customers. Our customers, they need to sustain our products. They want insights, and they stretch into the supply chain. So I need that information from the supply chain. And a lot of people have a knee-jerk reaction. I'm not going to let you into my system, over my dead body. I've been there. I've been a supplier to Ford, to even I was working for a supplier to Lockheed Martin. And we don't want these big guys in our systems. But we are going to have to develop a way of sharing information that is useful for me. I need to make my use cases known to the supply chain, and then the supply chain needs to say oh, is that what you're after? Well, here is the data artifact that actually you need to actually execute that specific use case. I believe that if I make it very clear to my supply chain what my use case is, I'm not going to go into the business of making these specific parts. I don't care. This is the use case I'm after. Okay, that's why I need the information. Send it to me. Ideally in a standard form, because if I get it in a standard form, I can automatically ingest it, and I can do all this stuff automated, and I can make my AI, if you will, so much more powerful. So that's the change. The cultural change is that it used to be that they sent me a couple of pounds of steel, that looked like something. Now it's a couple of pounds of steel that look like something plus a whole bunch of data artifacts. And that is where the cultural change is happening, and that cultural change is the most difficult stuff. Technically, I can explain what I need, but to have the culture change in a way that it becomes automatic, people just send the stuff out. That's where we're struggling. Culture is the most difficult thing of all. These changes.
I'm just going to tag. I'm going to tag on to that. I'm going to tag on to that, Jan. I think what everyone's going to learn is that, to your point, things change. There is a culture shift, because in the past, let's say you're in operations and you're sitting on what is this is your domain, so the data should belong to you, and you want to take that data, you want to go create value with it. Well, in the past, we've had to go then ask permission to someone else. It's like, hey, my facility creates this data, but it's sitting over in you're sitting on top of it. So can I get that data from you to go create value? And then you have to wait on a response. It's like, well, yeah, you can. If you do that, it's going to cost X amount of dollars for us to get the data back to you, when the data was mine to start with. And that's one of the biggest internal things that I think a lot of people will find out. Shannon?
Yeah, really, really great points here. And I think the questions coming from the audience a couple of them have to do with interoperability. And so maybe we can talk about that for just a moment, because I know we're quickly running out of time here. So maybe we can try to concisely answer, but I'm going to try to bundle two of the questions together. There's a lot of third-party applications that organizations are already using, some that already have their own analytical tools embedded within them, and some that, just are the raw data collection platforms. I'm curious, we all just touched on interoperability and how that's critical, not only internally, but externally. Do any of you have tips, and maybe I'll start with Vijay, if you can think about this first. Do you have any tips for how to start to address both issues of interoperability with tools that organizations are already using? Are you connecting through APIs? Are there systems that just naturally work together? And then also, the scalability question. I mean, these are two enormous questions on their own. But do you have any insight into how you've started to overcome those challenges?
Okay, so this I'll answer in twofold. So first thing is, I think naturally we are associated to a lot of legacy applications, and some of the times when we wanted to do these kinds of transformations, it was very, very difficult for us to pull the data out of the legacy systems and creating the integrations module. So there are a lot of technologies available, kind of an RPA kind of a tools where the legacy portion is not possible. So there are two layers. So one is wherever there is a very huge benefit, but it needs the transformation right from the top to bottom. So the bigger transformation kind of a thing. So we went ahead and completely removed all the multiple legacy systems and converted into one SaaS solution kind of a thing. That is a completely a radical movement. So that way, the SaaS will have all types of new advanced capabilities like the APIs kind of a thing. So any data that you want with the right permission, all those things can get it to any applications. So the API capability. But wherever some of the applications still cannot have the luxury to move into this advanced system, so where we can use the robotic process automation, or low code, no code, or kind of in a digital process automation where we can enable, this is where we can enable the business people itself by providing the right tools. So whenever they want to the data, they can connect to that respective systems and pull the data. So the other thing is, at the underlying, all the data are already transferred to the data lake or data warehouse kind of a thing. So from there, the data from the legacy systems, which are very complex to expose the data, are already consolidated in one data lake kind of an environment. From there, any people can easily consume it, and that is like a data catalog. So they will come to know what is the quality of the data, where it is coming from, who's the owner, and all those kind of information.
Excellent. Yeah, that's super helpful to hear all that. And unfortunately, we're out of time already. I feel like we're just starting to scratch the surface. I have a lot more questions I would love to ask each of you. But maybe we can close out with each of you leaving the audience with one key takeaway or final thought. And for those of you that ask questions, we will attempt to respond to you after this session. But Ron, maybe we can start with you. One key takeaway or key point that we can leave with the audience as we close out.
We had to find a place to start. And so we have a really good ERP system. The ERP system does a terrific job at transactions, and it's a good record keeper, but it doesn't have a lot of cognitive ability. So what we did is we put the twin, the AI module that serves as a twin between the customer and between our ERP. So we know all of the orders that are coming in. And so that's where we started. And then we taught it to demand plan, and then we taught it procurement, and then we taught it distribution, and we're now working on payables. And then the plan after that is for connected workforce, because you want a system that understands your employee, understands their strengths and their weaknesses, and how you want to skill them and reskill them and upskill them. And so that's kind of where we started. But you know, if you've already got this tremendous ERP that you spent a lot of money on, you're not going to get rid of that, and you're not going to create an ERP with these things. That's not what they do, Shannon. They're there to help you to make decisions, right? And they utilize data, and it utilizes knowledge to do that. Jan?
Yeah, the quick point from my is focus on the data. The data needs to be usable. It needs to be usable for use cases, and then focus on the data. Build simple use cases first, and then try to get more complex later. Don't try to attack this from the other end, where you first want to build like incredible AI stuff, and then try to work your way down to the data, because that will lead to nothing but snowflakes and stuff that look good in a video, but can be scaled and can be ported. So focus on the data, start small, crawl, walk, run, and then eventually you'll make your way into AI. It'll not be that difficult at that point.
Great point. BJ, one key takeaway.
So from my point of view, so all these things are ever going to change always. So nothing is permanent in this. So whenever we are getting into this kinds of a thing, we always think big and start small, fail quickly, and then scale fast. That kind of an mindset we need to have it, and always have that agile mindset, as Ron said. So not necessarily we need to provide the solutions in a perfect way at the very first time. So we need to quickly test the hypothesis and do it iteratively and reach the clear purpose or vision of that transformation.
I love it. Don't get perfect, get going, and keep moving, and fail and learn and keep going forward. Thank you all so much. Like I said, I wish we had more time to get into these questions. Nicole, I will turn it back over to you, but thank you all for the time today, and I've really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you to the audience for listening in.
Great. Thank you so much, Shannon, Jan, BJ, and Ron, for your very informative discussion this morning. And thank you to everyone watching, wherever you are. If you want to listen to this webinar again, the session will be available on demand shortly, and our next session will be starting in 5 minutes' time. You can join us for the session, Use Cases for Digital Twin and Supply Chain within the Healthcare and Manufacturing Industries, by clicking on the button that appears in the bottom right corner of your screen now. Thanks again to all 4 of you for your great discussion today, and we'll see everyone else on the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you.